The world is becoming more unglued by the day. Local consequences are now showing up. We are seeing sky-high gas prices, higher food prices, shortages, and more. How should you respond? Go to redpills.tv/patriot. That's redpills.tv/patriot. And secure your long-term emergency food storage from My Patriot Supply. My Patriot Supply is by far the largest preparedness company in America. They're in stock and shipping quickly in unmarked boxes to your door. Their emergency food supplies last up to 25 years in storage. When you need it, it'll be there. Lunches, dinners, drinks, and snacks totaling over 2,000 calories a day. Get free shipping on any order over $99. Again, go to redpills.tv/patriot.
From the spaceship in the sky to the simulation in the mind. Let's all embark on another journey of Conversations on the Fringe.
Well, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Josh, and welcome to the Red Pill Project's Conversations on the Fringe. Live with you every Friday night, 7:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is where we go beyond the realm of the norm, and we talk about the weird, the wacky, the unusual, those things that aren't really brought up in normal conversation, those things that really do need to be talked about. Tonight, we have a great show. We were just talking before this show, and I'm telling you, this is going to be absolutely epic. We're going to be talking a little bit about the Germans in World War II. We're going to be talking about Australia. We're going to be talking about UFOs. We're going to be talking about Esoterica, occult, everything in between. I don't know where this conversation is going to go, but I'm pretty excited. My guest, Brad Olsen, is the author of 10 books, including 3 in his Esoteric Series, Modern Esoteric, Future Esoteric, and the newly released Beyond Esoteric. He's an award-winning author, book publisher, event producer, and his keynote presentations and interviews have enlightened audiences at Contact in the Desert, UFO Mega Conference, 5D events, and dozens of radio shows. Guys, we're not going to take a commercial because we're just going to get right to it with Brad. I'm going to bring him right in. Brad, how are you doing today?
Hey, Josh, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on this Conversation on the Fringe. It's right where I want to be.
Fantastic, man. You know, it's I just came up with the wrong screen. Sorry, guys. But hey, look, this is like my day off. So I do a political commentary show. We go over like a lot what's happening in the world, the New World Order, the taking over of our freedoms, our liberties here in America. And it's just really good to get away from that level of information, to get away from the darkness in the world and really talk about those things that help expand your mind a little bit.
Oh, this is where all the fun's at.
Absolutely.
Stare too long at the sun, but mama, that's where the fun is.
That's it. So I was listening to Coast to Coast AM, and I heard you on there, and I reached out to my producer, and I'm like, we got to get this guy. And you actually went to Antarctica. You're a 7-continent person. You went to Antarctica. And so put all the flat earthers to shame right now and just tell them that there's no ice wall, the earth's not flat.
Oh, I just spent 2 hours with Flat Earth Dave talking in circles with the guy. Yeah, been there, and his argument that, you cannot fly over the continent, or there's an ice wall, or there's not a continent of Antarctica. And I'm just flipping through my phone, be like, here's some pictures of my sailboat trip down there. Yeah, it's a real place, man. And I've talked to exploration companies that have the large cargo planes that can pretty much fly anywhere on the continent. It's expensive, but you can do it. Because I was approached by a film crew right when I came back 3 years ago and started talking in conferences and on coast to coast and everywhere else. Because as far as I know, I'm the only researcher in this field that's been down there to look into specifically all these questions that we've heard of what might be going on down there. And while it's a fascinating place, Josh, some of the things I was looking for I didn't find, but then I came across some things that kind of shocked me.
Well, let's get into that a little bit. Now, a lot of your experience comes from researching various occult origins. And so is this what led you down to Antarctica?
Well, yeah, and I've been to all the other continents of the world and South America with the megaliths, and so much mystery on how those were built and put into place, and why you can never see chisel marks on the really old megaliths, and all the mystery behind ancient civilizations is a real fascination to me. And I'm sure with your audience and you too, Josh. And we've heard that there were stories of perhaps Atlantis under the ice, or pyramids poking through, or digging up archaeological ruins down there, or finding some on scan radar or with drones. So I really wanted to look into this and talk to the people who were down there, or boat captains who were down there regularly. And while I couldn't get any direct evidence on that, what I did find was there is definitely a big no-fly zone near the South Pole. And that's pretty interesting, because who the heck's flying over the South Pole to begin with? And so this was one of Flat Earth Dave's arguments. There was this flight. He was supposed to go across the continent. He went to the South Pole and came right back. I said, well, yeah, half of it is blocked off as a no-fly. They'll escort your plane out of there. But like George Norrie said on Coast to Coast, why do they need a no-fly zone there? It makes no sense. And he's right. Why do they need a no-fly zone? Because it protects what is most likely a giant gaping hole in the polar plateau ice, which at South Pole is about 2 miles thick. It is the highest elevation continent because there's so much accumulated ice there. And from Admiral Byrd to other whistleblowers who have seen the hole in the ice, it's a very real phenomenon to them. And that, I think, is one of the biggest mysteries of Antarctica. Now, I should just preface it by saying that Antarctica is the most volcanically active continent in the world. And it's 91 known volcanoes with a lot of geothermal activity. I went to Desolation Island, and there was a hot spring there. Had the tide not been coming in, could have stripped down naked and laid down in this hot spring on Desolation Island. So it is truly the land of fire and ice. And it would lead to the propensity of creating these large ice domes underneath. So it occurred to me that, man, if there was any place you wanted to hide out on planet Earth and not be seen by satellites or drones or planes or anything, under the ice and the farthest depths of the oceans are the last truly unexplored places on this planet.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting that you talked about Admiral Byrd and you talked about this gaping hole. Nassim Harriman has talked a lot about the various types of torus and vortex theories. Yep. Now, it would make a lot of sense in his depiction of the Schwarzschild radius, the black hole, that a planet is very, very much similar and shaped in the sense of torus. And so with the hole in the center, that would make actually a lot of sense. Now, Admiral Byrd, can you explain a little bit about that story?
Well, what people need to know, and this is even predating Operation High Jump, which I know you want to get into, and I'm happy to give an account of what happened down there. But he was a master explorer, not only a sea captain and an admiral, but also a navigator and a pilot. And so he was really taking it upon himself to explore the farthest reaches of both polar regions. and over the South Pole. It's presumed that he also found the one in the North Pole. And I'm glad you brought up Nassim Haramein, who was on the South America trip with me right before I went down to Antarctica. He's a friend of mine and great new physicist, bringing forth great concepts and idea. And the whole concept is that there would be two entrances at both poles, just like a torus. And so Admiral Byrd was flying over the pole. He did set a record as being the first person to fly over the South Pole. And at that point in his diary, he wrote about seeing this hole in the ice, which is about 40 miles across. And he felt confident enough to just take his plane into it and go down to that 2-mile depth down to the bedrock of eastern Antarctica, which, by the way, is one of the oldest land masses on Earth. It broke off from Pangea so many millions of years ago, and it's still one of our continents. Where I went on the northern tip of the Palmer Peninsula, that is actually a newer landmass, and they're actually in the process of merging together, plate tectonics. So it's quite different, the lay of the land, depending on where you go in Antarctica. But Byrd says he went down there in his journal and saw really fantastic flora and fauna that should not have been there. And I could tell you, Josh, that there are no trees or bushes or really anything green down there. It's just devoid of that kind of plant life we would see here. And the biggest animal is just a little springette, little bug that can live down there in the very, very harsh climates. Of course, the sea mammals, seals and so forth, and the penguins, they come out of the water and they have their nesting and roosting, and that was really enjoyable to see all that. And the whales would come right up and sometimes even under our boat. So the animals had no fear of humans. It was really amazing, part of it. But so Admiral Byrd was discovering this huge hole in the ice, and since the 1930s, right around the time the Germans were moving into their New Schwabenland claim, these stories of all this weird stuff was happening, and presumably they're finding some of these crafts under the ice.
Now, you said crafts under these ice. Now, you mentioned the Germans, New Schwabenland, right? And this was one of the places that the Germans actually set up a base. I think they were utilizing the point of South Africa or South Africa to go down into there during World War II. And this was, in a sense, there was various occult origins that tied into Nazi Germany. You had Astara, which was a magazine that prompted the Thule Society. You had the Inner Circle, and a lot of this rose out of Blavatsky in the mid-1800s, and then massive different origins throughout the progression in Europe throughout the Esoterica, but this landed in Germany. And they set out on a quest to go out and find various different artifacts. One of the quests north introduced them to something known as the Repill. And then after this, they end up in Antarctica.
Right. And I'm glad you brought the occult side of it up, because the official badge of the ship called New Schwabenland, and Schwabenland is a area in Germany. It's just like New Zealand is Zealand from Holland, and New York is York, England. So it was pretty common for explorers in the 19th and 20th century to just put a new on the name. So they go down there in the 30s, late 30s, and Hermann Göring was very interested, Hermann Hesse, and these guys were right up there with Hitler and Himmler as far as being very interested, even obsessed with the occult. And on the official logo of the New Schwabenland exploration are the oak leaves, which are symbols of occult interest in this area. In this presentation that I give at conferences, and I'll be at Contact 2022 next month in Sedona, I'll give my talk called The Hidden Anomalies of Antarctica and show this badge, but also get into why they chose the New Schwabenland area. And one of those reasons, I was really shocked when I was looking at maps from pre-World War II, like after the war, but before the wall came down. So in the mid-'80s, National Geographic had all the bases of Antarctica, and in New Schwabenland, there's the West German flag. They never left. Okay, and one of those bases is inland, and it's a seasonal base called Conan. When I was doing more research and looking at coordinates off of Google Earth, up comes this giant, about quarter-mile machine sticking out of the ice, and I show pictures of it in my presentation. That turned out to be the exact coordinates of the West German Conan base. So it's not too much of an extension to say the Nazis found one of the big three crafts. And supposedly there are three crafts, and our intelligence agencies have named them the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, after the first three ships of Columbus's voyage to the New World. And I would have to say this has got to be one of those three.
So this is interesting. I've had Dr. Michael Sala on this show a few times, and he comes from a different avenue of information, and he said very similar things as you, that the Germans had bases down there, that there are, he actually claims that there is a whole, that 3 miles under the ice, they discovered a fleet of aircraft, of UFOs, of an advanced civilization. And that they were basically going in there and trying to reverse engineer this technology, and there was different countries working together. I don't know the truth behind all that, but he also claimed that Antarctica was the old Atlantis that destroyed in one night during a massive cataclysm. Now, can you talk a little bit more about the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, and kind of how maybe this came about?
Sure. Well, Dr. Michael Sala is a colleague of mine, and you can consider him a friend. We met on the set of Ancient Aliens about 5 or 6 years ago, both talking about Antarctica. And just want to show you an image out of my new book. This is Antarctica without the ice. So you can see at the top there, the Palmer Peninsula, Western Australia, is a different landmass than the old East Antarctica. And then if we go directly below South Africa here, this is the New Schwabenland claim. And look at that, there's a fjord that must be hundreds of miles long, because if it shows up on that map, as well as ways to access completely underneath the ice between those two land masses and get over to the other side. Now, the Germans took a huge interest in New Schwabenland, and the Admiral Dolentz, who basically surrendered the Third Reich the Third Reich never surrendered, just the fighting forces, the Wehrmacht Army, the Luftwaffe Air Force, and the Kriegsmarines, the Navy. They surrendered, but the Third Reich never surrendered. So you could say, well, they're still kind of at large. And this is what we believe became the Fourth Reich, really immediately following. Now, here's a map of the New Schwabenland claim, and that Conan base would be right about here. That's where one of the craft is. Down here are the Schumacher Ponds, and that's where the initial party landed, a geothermal lake that never frees. And then so the New Berlin base would have been right up here in that mountain range.
Wow.
And if I were ever to go back, and I have been offered to do some film work, but COVID hit and we couldn't follow through with going down there in 2020. But I would want to go to New Schwabenland and see if we could find where the old base was. And I think it would be a fascinating documentary. And plus, bring down some Geiger counters to see if the U.S. hit them during Operation Argus, which is still considered a top secret nuclear testing event in the late 1950s. But this was in response to America and the Allies. It wasn't just the Americans, but all of the countries that fought in World War II in an armada that went down to confront New Schwabenland in the Battle of High Jump. And by all accounts, were routinely routed. It wasn't even one-sided, because the opponents didn't lose anything. It was totally a rout. And then a couple of years later was the flyover of DC with this kind of craft, the Hanibu craft, that was backward engineered from alien technology. And let's give some credit to the German engineers. They're pretty clever people too. I'm sure they threw in a few features of their own. They tried to make them fighting craft.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't really work out that way in World War II, although the Allies they were afraid of the wonder weapons and some of the stuff that they heard Hitler had accumulated. And given 6 more months in that war, we might all still be talking German in Europe and even in America. It could have flipped very quickly. So the way history unfolded, but then they went underground, literally in bases in South America. And I went and visited a few. I was on the trail of some of the Nazis in South America. There's a great show called Hunting Hitler, 3
awesome
seasons. Oh man, you come away from that being like, yeah, Hitler, he lived, and so did a lot of other ones like Martin Bormann, the money man. And then they just started their industry and investing in stock and the paperclip Nazis that came here. And that's the Fourth Reich, Josh. They're still around and even, you could say, wreaking havoc.
Well, you know, it's interesting. We are on YouTube, so I can't talk too much about this. But we've already made the parallel connections to the coup that occurred in 2014 in Ukraine, how the Central Intelligence Agency, John Brennan, Eric Carmella, who funded it, utilizing various different rebel groups in Ukraine, also known as the Azov, which was a Nazi regiment, a group of rebels during that time. And they brought them in, they funded them, and then they implemented them into their military, their political, and their economic structures, and then basically took over all the banking industries within the Eastern old Soviet Union and Eastern European nations. And this is where a massive money laundering scheme began. And I'm talking billions upon billions of dollars each year of money laundering. But a lot of what is happening right now between Russia and Ukraine has to do with actual, real, legitimate Nazis. People don't know that the Black Star right there, the Star of Chaos. So Alan Dulles, who him and his brother wrote the Treaty of Versailles, ending World War I, are also the ones that stood over the Nuremberg trial and gave all the Nazis in Ukraine complete immunity.
Yep. And you've probably heard the story that at the end of World War II, the Nazis were pulling out all these young, beautiful Aryan women. Up to 10,000 of them went missing at the end of the war.
Yep.
A lot of them went down to Antarctica and South America to be the brides of many of these scientists and other top officials who escaped through the rat lines. You know, my new book, Beyond Esoteric, I start the whole first section about neo-fascism that has affected the world. And I do believe it is an outgrowth of this whole Fourth Reich, this third power that was fanning the flame of dissent during the Cold War between the U.S. and the Soviets. Look, we're not enemies with Russia. We've been friends with them for a long time. We've been doing the space station together, and Kennedy wanted to merge us together and explore outer space and go to the planets with the Russians. And, well, we know what happened to President Kennedy.
Hey, peace is a dangerous thing, okay?
Yeah. Good point.
Yeah, and you're right. We've been friends with the Russians, and so a lot of this doesn't make sense. And you're right. I call it techno-fascist totalitarianism, because you have this techno-fascist state that is derived through mass surveillance, through the control of the digital platforms, which are utilized in the sense of psychological warfare perpetuated onto human beings that brings them into a mass psychosis. Then you also have the totalitarian dictatorships that arrange around that through oligarchies, monopolies, what I call the multinationalists. This is being derived by these old ancient secret societies, the Club of Rome, the round tables, which now are basically operating out of the head of the snake, the World Economic Forum, which is implementing policy throughout the world. But all of this is directly interrelated to... Now, let me ask you this. Do you think that this is all interrelated, that these Nazis had a breakaway civilization, that they were probably living down in Antarctica or into the hollow earth aspect of it, underneath the ice or in somewhere in hollow earth, and that a lot of these TikTok UFOs that we're seeing are probably their technology, reverse engineered, because they've had 100 years to do it? What are your thoughts?
Oh, you're right on the tip, Josh. I think you just nailed it right there. You can even go one step further and say that they had some help. In fact, even Werner von Braun and Hermann Oberth, when asked, how did the Germans come into all this high technology, Hermann Oberth said, well, we had help from our friends from above, meaning extraterrestrials. And it's a pretty good chance that they allied with the reptilian, more the malevolent ETs, and who have had a legacy base down in Antarctica for a long, long time. So whether the Nazis chose New Schwabenland because they were already there, corroborating what Dr. Sala said about finding some of these craft way deep below the ice, or finding the submarine routes under the ice to get to some of these hollowed out giant dome-like cavities. For example, in Antarctica, one of the 10 largest freshwater lakes in the world exists under the ice there. It's called Lake Vostok. Can you imagine what kind of world that must be when the sun is going over the South Pole for 4 months of midnight sun? How it would shine through in that dome. In fact, the Russians have a base right above it, the Vostok base. They were the first to drill through. And in 2018, this is all still very recent, what they're pulling up from there, but they're finding bacteria that they think came off of a fish that they've never seen this form of life before. So there's life down there underneath, living in these thermal geothermal vents. And even in the deepest depths of the ocean, new forms of life that are still being discovered here on this planet.
And that's quite amazing. And I think what we'll find here in the near future is that there's more forms of intelligent life that exist on this planet. I think you actually refer to them as, you have interterrestrial, you have extraterrestrial, and you have, what's the other one?
Ultra-terrestrial. Multidimensional.
And with the Nazis there, I would actually say that it's probably ultra-terrestrial. And the reason I say that is because a lot of my research has been pertaining to the hiding of knowledge, what I call the battle between the serpent and the eagle, that has portrayed for millennia. How all these eagle-based religions always come up and take away all these indigenous and native serpent cults, which we would refer to the pagan cults, which were basically the bearers and holders of the torch of knowledge, of light, of these ancient secrets. And then you had Catholicism, the Crusades, and they would go through and just demolish them. You have the story of St. Peter going to Ireland and killing all the Druids. And so what we get is the Book of Enoch talks about how the Watchers were hidden away for 90 generations. Madame Blavatsky herself talks about how she got the majority of her information was through channeling different types of beings and entities. Aleister Crowley talks about this as well, that he goes out there and channels Anath Khanfu, who was an ancient god of Egypt, who basically opened a channel of magic for him. If we tie that into the Gnostics and the Archons, we start seeing that maybe this is an interdimensional influence on humanity that has caused a lot of the destruction. And in the late 1800s, what they did is they reopened those channels that were originally shut down with these interdimensional beings, and this is where a lot of that stemmed from. And then you can tie that directly to the Thule Society and the Germans.
Really well said, Josh. You're absolutely on the tip with that. And we can even take it one step further back with the Vril Society. Remember the women, Maria Orsic, and another called Sigril, who wore their hair really long, like antennas, really beautiful Germanic women who were psychic mediums. And they were communicating right after World War I. Germany just went into hyperspace with their scientific know-how. And part of that was through this Vril Society. They were telepathically communicating with Aldebaran and able to put pen to paper and start drafting some designs of zero-point energy craft, of free energy devices, of interstellar craft. And it didn't take long for the Thule Society says, oh, that's pretty cool. Maybe it's got a application in our military industrial complex, and yeah, we'll take that from you. And though the Vril Society then merged into the Thule Society, and then you had the Anunnaki Society, which was going around collecting all these artifacts that they felt if they had the Spear of Destiny, for example. The first thing Hitler did when he annexed Austria was to go into the museum to get the Spear of Destiny, supposedly the spear point that punctured Jesus on the cross. And there was that's why they're the Third Reich, because Charlemagne was another one of the Reichs, and then Bismarck was the one before. And all the while, Austria-Hungary and with Charlemagne, they always had the spear of destiny. And that's why they felt they had this ability to win a war as force multipliers, even though they're farly outnumbered with material and manpower. If they could use these occult items, which, by the way, the Spear of Destiny is still gone missing, presumably down in Antarctica, as well as many other priceless artifacts that they looted out of Europe, and many metric tons of gold. And Martin Bormann, the money man, he keeps popping up all over South America, financing German-owned businesses and a whole bunch of other stuff. So you better believe that they had a lot of influence, and they got it out of there at the end of the war. In fact, Patton was really upset that he could have beelined it up to Berlin in late 1944, and the whole, the Sixth Army was prevented from crossing the Rhine River. And then miraculously, the next day, they blow up the bridge, and then that slowed Patton down. Because if he could have gotten there sooner, they wouldn't have gotten out much of the technology that they did with that just 4 or 5 months more time.
That's interesting. Now, I remember, I think it was Otto Heinrich, which was one of the head officers of the Third Reich. He was actually the one that was being sent out on a lot of these excavations, and he sent the most well-known telegram that's still a mystery to a lot of people, but if you understand the occult circles, this was the search for the Ark of the Covenant, and he sent back a telegram to Germany saying, "Eureka, we found it." And this is supposedly him finding the Ark of the Covenant in a very, very sacred place that they were told that it would be in, and they got it from ancient manuscripts. What you just said there about the bridge blowing up and allowing them time to get out, that actually makes a lot of sense if we know who the financiers of the war were. The financiers of the war are the real Nazis. These are the globalists of the time, the bankers, the old black Italian nobility, the old monarchical structures that have controlled and ruled over this world, especially the new banking dynasties out of the Americas, who basically were funding the Nazi war against Germany, or against Europe, and against Russia. And what happened, I think, is very similar to what just happened recently, in the sense that Putin and Xi Jinping saw that there was no place for nation states, for their people, or for their leadership in the New World Order. And so they separated and divided from the New World Order, and now kind of attacking them to create their own nation state-derived New World Order. And Hitler saw the same thing. He goes, if I win this war, they're just going to replace me and remove me, and they're going to be in control because they want this kind of oligarchical control. So F them. I got all the guns. I got all the money. I got all the ammunition. We got all the power. We're done with them. But at the end of the war, they still wanted to get all their assets out, and the bankers and the financiers allowed them to do it. And this is probably why they delayed the American troops, because the American troops were just utilized as basically a stopgate for the Nazi incursion throughout Europe.
Meet the new boss, same as the old boss.
100%.
It's amazing how these bloodline dynasty families, just generation after generation, keep churning it out. And so I hope finally, Josh, we start to wake up for their shenanigans and root them out, because this has become an anti-human depopulation agenda. And it just, if it goes much further or many more years, it's not going to be much of a world to live in if they lock us down with what they want to do. So it's good that we're calling them out and we're understanding how they do these sort of things, because we've been handicapped for a long time and not understanding who the enemy really is, and you know how good they are at obfuscating their identity and not really telegraphing their game plan, although they do have to release certain bits and pieces. It's called the revelation of the method, and through predictive programming and little bylines in an article, you'll see that they basically talk around, but sometimes even give away their playbook, but they have to, because this is a planet of free will. So if they just wanted to go full fascist prison planet on us, which it's kind of leading to, but they always have to say, well, hey, we told them. Yep. We gave them little hints in Hollywood movies and rap songs, whatnot. Everybody that does this whole thing, or the pyramid over their eyes, they're selling out to this cabal, and this is who the real enemy is. I often find it really disingenuous when people say, oh, our government this, or this politician that, or this party did this. Look, they're puppets. They got a master with the strings up here that are giving them the script to read in the media and giving them talking points for their agendas. I mean, this is all orchestrated from above, top down. It's the old hierarchy of a pyramid, right? And you see it all over the world. The Vatican is, the banking system is, governments are kind of mid-level. They're getting their talking points from above. But that's who we're truly up against, is these billionaires who have just gamed the system to their advantage at every step of the way. And they own everything, including the media. Like 6 companies own over 90% of the media outlets in this country. So I always say to people, hey, man, you want to get what the globalists want you to think? Go ahead, watch your TV, because that's propaganda, 100%.
Yep. And you mentioned there that they have to tell you. Now, this is interesting. When you start talking about natural law, which are the basic foundations of the understanding of consciousness interacting with the universe and what we would call, I guess, magic in the occult world, is in natural law, you can be in a state of kind of understanding, or you can be in a state of not knowing. The state of not knowing is known as nescience or ignorance, and this is when you're not in tune with natural law. Now, right. White magicians, they utilize natural law to influence their reality for their benefit or for the benefit of others. Dark magicians, they utilize natural law in accordance with natural law to influence those people that are in ignorance or nescience to their benefit, of which those people in nescience and ignorance receive some type of karmic infliction, bad life, no money, poverty, whatever it might be, and those people that are utilizing natural law to do that get the benefit of that influence. And that's kind of the premise of dark magic, is utilizing the ignorance or the nescience of the people. This is why one of the reasons why knowledge is occulted in this world, is because knowledge is powerful. If people truly knew and understood the things that we're talking about, the things that we know in the sense of how the occult world formed, what occult knowledge actually is, what esoteric knowledge is, the knowledge of the self, the understanding the true identity of the self, all these different things, this world would be a completely different place. We'd probably be living like our ancestors 100,000 years ago.
But now we have the Great Awakening, Josh, and all that has been hidden will be revealed.
Yep.
And you have to have eyes to see and ears to hear. You have to really seek this stuff out. See, that's part of their game plan. They just figure most people are just too lazy and just take what they're told, and that must be true because it comes from Walter Cronkite or your trusted news source. But they're part of it too. I mean, they're reading scripts. It's called programming for a reason. They're trying to program you into their way of thinking. And then once you do that, once you start following along with them and believing their narrative, then they got you. Yep. And that's where they want you. And nothing is more important to them right now than controlling the narrative, which is starting to break down. And we're starting to see through how they've manipulated the people for so long and what they've kept hidden. So I like the fact that you are delving into the occult and esoterica, because this is really where it's at. This is what they have been holding as a prized possession for a long, long time. And really, for the first time, we're getting a glimpse. Lay persons like you and I, who haven't taken a secret oath or gone up through the degrees in Freemasonry, we're able to just leapfrog all that and go right up to, okay, what are they really up to? What do they really find important? And that's where these studies take you.
Yeah, and a lot of the things that I've been tying together recently, as I've said, I'm developing a docuseries right now called The Slave Matrix. And a lot of things that I've been seeing are pertaining to DNA, pertaining to the expression of our DNA, pertaining to a state of increasing consciousness. When we start getting into the grand calendar system, the processional calendar system, one thing that I talk about is if you look at astrotheology, or if you look at the movement of the stars and the sun and the moon, The sun does an interesting thing if you watch it every day in the sky at noon every day, and you mark it in a dot. It does what's known as an analemma. And so it'll go up to the summer solstice, it'll come back down to the spring and fall equinoxes, and then go to the winter solstice. And it forms a figure 8, the number 8, which means beyond God, in the sky. Well, the moon does this over the 29 and a half days that it passes through. And so if we know as above, so below, this means that our solar system also does this through its transit through the galactic center, which means that at those 2 equinoxes in the middle, that we're going to have a high concentration of density. Now Niasim Harriman can talk about this because we have 2 black holes at the center of the galaxy, so we have a discretion disk that basically flattens out parallel. This means the concentration of mass and energy on the galactic center is more towards the center. This is where the equinox periods would be in this transit of up and down. And if we looked at galactically, it was about 8,000 years of darkness through this transit out of this equinox period. And this is why we're truly moving from dark to light in the sense of the receptibility of our DNA to God or to the universal creator, whatever it might be. But I think we're truly coming into kind of a renaissance and an awakening period, in a period of preset up evolution that the universe has prescribed. Very well said.
I'm fully on board with what you just related there. That's incredible. You're really, I'm going to put a gold star on your report card, Josh. Very well there.
I've done my homework. You
have indeed.
So tell me a little bit more about what you think this is really about, in the sense, what is happening right now on the planet? Obviously, we have puppet masters, but who's really controlling it? Do you think this is the reptilians? Do you think this is extra-dimensional? Do you think this is interdimensional?
That's the $10 million question right there. I like the quote from Bill Cooper in his very first talk at the UFO Congress. Man, there were so many great one-liners from that, but one of them was, you put the aliens in the middle of this stuff and you get all the answers. And in a way, he's right, because you really can't grasp the entirety of what's going on here on Earth unless you introduce exopolitics. Mm-hmm. And that is the whole interaction between humans and extraterrestrials. There are benevolent ones, there are malevolent ones. That is good and there is bad. There is yin and yang, even in our universe. And the baddies are these reptilian types that basically use the small grays, our test tube. They're not naturally born, hatched right here on Earth. You see, this is their workaround of the whole prime directive, the whole notion that emerging civilizations such as ours can't be directly tampered with. And that's why the benevolents won't just land on the White House and announce themselves. Not only do they not want to, because they'd be like our nannies, and anything that go wrong, oh, save us again, clean up Fukushima for us. No, that's our mess. It's like a little kid that you have to teach them to take responsibility and put their toys away. We have to take responsibility here on this planet. Now, we have been influenced unduly by these malevolent ETs to the point where we're really disadvantaged because we can't compete with that level of technology, nor their telepathic or ultra-terrestrial abilities. We just don't even know even what that is, let alone trying to match that technology to technology or telepathic communication with them. Now, some can do it here on Earth, the humans, but they're a select few, and we're certainly not getting this kind of training. I mean, wouldn't it be great if, say, when we were in kindergarten, we started learning about the body chakras, and then in first grade, we start communicating telepathically, and by third grade, we're bending a spoon with telekinesis, and in fifth grade, we're all astral traveling on a field trip out to a distant planet. I mean, so we're being taught everything wrong here on this planet, and we're incredibly disadvantaged when we're up against this kind of force. So there is a process of removing those malevolent ETs. And this is from contactee Alex Collier. And I've seen many data points to suggest what he's saying has been correct. And that is, because Earthlings were so disadvantaged by these high-tech and multi-dimensional ultra-terrestrial ETs, that we didn't have a chance. So of course, we were going to get taken hijack. And so he was saying that 9/11 was this moment that the Andromedians, his Conti group, benevolent ETs, identified as a moment when the fascism would then start. And it would go decades, it would even go centuries. So in 350 years from now, Earth would be a very menacing civilization in our galaxy. And we would even start to affect the Andromedians and other benevolent cultures. So they came and said, we have to do something about that. And so they sent their emissaries back in time to start doing little things to prevent us from going down this timeline too. And so this gets into like the looking glass technology and time travel as well. But it's a total fascination. That's why I put the yellow cube, this device that can access back in time and show you any moment from history. So all conspiracies would be off the table. We just know them all, especially if the common folk had access to this technology. But so they had to extract the malevolent ETs. They were largely the ones directing this anti-human agenda. Mm-hmm. And that's why, in some ways, we all kind of have some precognition of what's going to happen, that yeah, we're going to keep going down this dark path. But there'll be a moment when it just shifts, and then we do move towards the golden age, and many of us will be vindicated for trying to sound the warning system way back when. And it's almost this whole parallel universe concept too, that we have someone like ourselves in this parallel universe that is going to go down that dark path, that they knew that Earth was going to be this terrible tyranny, like the movie Avatar, where we just go out and exploit any planet we want. And it was going to really disrupt the whole balance of our, at least in our Milky Way galaxy. But then they interceded and they started to change the outcome of many events. And there are certain things that should have happened that did not happen. For example, the 2012 Olympics in London. Oh man, if you watch the opening ceremony, it is just so replete with so much predictive programming that they had coming down the pike for all this time, from the hospital beds to the kids to a giant puppet that's the Grim Reaper, to triangle, the Illuminati symbol, all around this Olympic stadium that they built. And there was supposed to be a big false flag that did not occur. Similarly, they never thought she would lose, and Hillary did not get elected in 2016. That was actually a very watershed moment, and that did avert World War III in that year. So there are things that are not happening on the timeline of two going down this terrible road and extreme fascism, as well as destroying the planet. And that more and more things are leading us to the timeline one, to the golden age. And that's the great awakening that's happening right now. And that's why these are such exciting times. Like we were talking in the pre-interview, is it doesn't get any better than this, but it's going to be intense and it's going to be really trying. And, you know, the supply chains are breaking down and they're doing a lot of things. These are not, oh, we're predicting the food shortages are coming up. No, they're planning it. Okay. So I'm sure your audience is quite savvy to know that they need to start prepping and have some foods on their shelves, because the elite know, ever since the French Revolution was the saying that total societal breakdown and chaos is only 8 meals away. Wow. That's just 3 days, Josh. And that's all the food that's on any supermarket shelf is only 3 days. So when it comes, and I was out here in California when we had the earthquake in '89, I have not seen supermarket shelves go bare in a matter of hours. That they were still open right after the earthquake. They're all gone. By the end of the day, everything was gone. So you might not have a chance to get prepared if it comes down real fast. And some parts of it might. Yep. And you know what, Brad, we've been talking about this for years. So for about 2.5 years, we've been warning everybody. I don't want to, I'm not psychic. I'm not precog or anything like that. I'm just very intuitive. And I understand how to pearl string. I know how to look at the narrative and see where things are going. And I understood a while back that
these, whatever they are, at least the puppet masters, is they will never give up power. They will scorch the earth before they give up power. So we looked at, okay, what type of ammunition do they have under their control that they would utilize against humanity before they scorch the earth? And that's politics, that's economics, that's supply chain, that's infrastructure and energy, and that's World War III. And where are we right now? We have cyber attacks on infrastructure. We have the supply chain breakdown. We have global financial collapse. We have World War III breaking out. So everything that we said, we call the global firestorm event. Everything that we said 2.5 years ago is happening right now. We probably got one of the most prepared audiences in the world because they've been stocking up for this whole time. And
right.
And we get it. And you're right. And so the thing I wanted to ask you, though, about this, because there is this kind of fall from Eden, if you want to call it that, where humanity, it seems, or appeared, was once in a high stature of spiritual and technological development, but now are not. Do you think there was some type of genetic alteration? Do you think that there is some type of influence, either recently or far in the past, in humanity that destroyed that old civilization and really kind of recreated this a new civilization?
Well, yeah, in the fall of man, we could also say that sounds quite like Atlantis, which became this high-tech civilization and used it against themselves in wars against the people of the Near East. And there are areas in the Sahara Desert where the stone has just been vitrified, means turns to glass. Yep. Stone and sand just turn to glass. That can only be achieved from extreme heat. And in the Indus civilizations of what is today Pakistan, there's a Mohenjo-Daro, an old archaeological site that they had central plumbing. It was quite an advanced civilization. And as the archaeologists were excavating, they came across people just laying in the street in a very unnatural way, sometimes holding hands. And then somebody broke out a Geiger counter. They still were radioactive. Wow. So there was some kind of war that took place using weapons, which we have again today. And this is a big disruption in the order of things in the universe. So when we're talking about ultra-terrestrials, we're talking about beings that can exist in dimensions that we can't see or perceive. And when we strike a nuclear bomb, that's why there were UFOs over the first nuclear bomb testings at White Sands. Some even say that they were witnessed over Hiroshima and Nagasaki when we bombed Japan at the end of World War II, and as well as a lot of other nuclear bomb tests, including out at Bikini Atoll and elsewhere, that they're very, very interested in this. In fact, the contactees who were basically working with our government in some of the military, that when they tried to intercede, the benevolence talked to Eisenhower, said, look, you got to give up these nuclear bombs. This is no good. This is going to really upset the balance of things, and they're very destructive. There was a big decision to go with the malevolent ETs. They're just such whores for technology. They said, you know what, we don't want to give that up. We're in this Cold War thing with the Soviets, and we can't give up our nukes. But this other extra group says that they'll give us all kinds of stuff, and they did. And that's why the abduction scenarios have played out for decades, as well as cattle mutilations. So we give them cover and allow them to operate, as well as use some of their underground bases without being too disturbed. Now, there have been some wars. There have been underground wars, one at Dulce, New Mexico, and another one at Area 51 in the underground bases. And I chronicle them and give that history, that hidden history here, including what Phil Schneider talked about. And he was one of the people who was suicided with a catheter in the back of his neck, and he could pull it so tight and tie a knot, and suicide that way? Really? Come on. And nothing valuable was stolen out of his apartment, but they took all of his ET artifacts that he had collected while working on these underground military bases. So the strange story of Phil Schneider is another bit of esoteric history that I think people really should know if they don't already. But to understand at any time you get a little too close, especially in outside force, like he was working with just some geologists, putting drill holes down and going down to investigate. And then he stumbled into this base near Dulce, and it ended up in a firefight, and some of our Navy SEALs went down there and didn't come back out, and it was pretty messy.
Yep.
And you know, so there's that kind of history, Josh, that I think people really should get a handle on and understand if they can.
Yeah, and you know, the interesting thing is that you know, Phil Snyder, I think, is 100% absolutely honest and truthful in everything that he said. He didn't ask for it. He didn't want it. You know, he had these backstories, and one day he's sitting in his backyard, and I think he was mowing the lawn or something, and it all started to come back to him. And he talked about the story where he was down there, and the alien kind of does this wave like this across his chest, and next thing you know, he lost his fingers. And kind of, he talks about these different stories. And I think the fact that we know he didn't suicide himself, that he was murdered, is a good vindication that he was straight on, correct, and right. I think it was Eisenhower who was the one. Oh, you want to go and show that? Go ahead and show that.
Oh, this is just describing the.
Okay.
This is strange bizarre account of Phil Schneider, and then the Nightmare Hall at Dulce, and the Dulce Wars, and all the kind of edited history.
Yeah, no, and a lot of people claim that this is something I've heard. So we did a lot of research on human trafficking, especially child trafficking, and then sacrificial worship, or the sacrificing of children. And this is one of the main reasons why 800,000 children go missing in the United States each year, which is just a little less than 1% of the population, and they're never heard from again. Right. And one of the things that came out was that, and actually I think there's a TV show that just did a bit on this. What is it? They'll tell me in the chat. But basically, Eisenhower made a deal with a group of reptilian aliens to do exactly what you said. Utilize for cattle mutilations, go ahead and utilize their bases. But these are the ones that have these bases deep in the Versameda, in the Dulce bases. And what they have down there is very, very similar to, I think, what is it called? The 100 or whatever it is that they have human beings in cages, and they utilize the adrenal glands of children to intoxicate themselves. So it's like alcohol for them. And so human beings, children primarily, are a level of food for this extraterrestrial reptilian breed, to where they actually get intoxicated off of the glandular system in human beings.
As well as the fear that is emitted when they get the adrenochrome extraction.
Yep.
And that is called loosh. And then this goes also into the ultra terrestrials. And don't think they're all nice little cuddly aliens. They're pretty nasty, some of them. And they feed off of the fear and the anger that can be produced when you put a person in a very stressful situation. And then, of course, if it's a fight or flight mechanism, if somebody is fearing for their lives, they scare them to that point when you get the purest kind of adrenochrome coming out of there. But on the fourth dimensional realm, the lower fourth dimension, are the archons. Yep. And they feed off the loosh that is produced from fear that comes out of humans. So this is dark and diabolical and really evil. This whole other side of it is. So, I mean, when you go into the occult, remember, the occult just means the hidden. And there are interesting and benign aspects of the occult that you can study, and it's not a big deal, and it's kind of interesting. Of course, you and I both are very much into it, and we're not getting pried upon, at least hopefully not too bad. But you screwed around with a Ouija board, I'm sure, and how creepy that can be. So you got to be careful what you wish for, because if you call these entities in, they can give you a lot of trouble.
They can. 2010, I had an experience where I had to shut all the doors and the windows to my soul. And I shut magic off for a very, very long time because of the experience. It wasn't bad. It wasn't evil. I just wasn't in control. And that was the problem. But I've had some experiences where, 2008, I did a, have you ever read the book, Dr. Brian Weiss, Many Lives, Many Masters, or the other one is Journey of Souls, where you do hypnotherapy sessions. Instead of going to your past life, they take you to your last time you died, and they take you in between lives. And so you go to the place where you go after death. And I did a hypnotherapy session with this therapist, and I went and I met this woman who was 7 foot tall, very, very skin narrow, humanoid face, but definitely not human, kind of like very, very white, just brilliant white hair. Wow. Everything about her had just a long kind of silvery gown on, and I've never experienced anything like that before. I've never seen pictures of anything like that before. And we start communicating. She tells me kind of what is happening to the world, why the world is in the place it's in. Basically, that the whole process of reincarnation is these ultra dimensionals have hijacked the system of reincarnation, and they feed off of the suffering that happens here on this planet, and that they were here to help us rid them of this. So a lot of what you're saying was very, very accurate in the sense of what I've experienced in my life, and that being I've had contact with 15, 20 years, and wow. It takes me, I got to get into a pretty interesting state to contact it. But whenever I do, it's like a massive download of knowledge that unfolds over time. I was actually researching Solomon's Mysteries, the Mysteries of Solomon's Temple. And I had done about a good year's of research on it. And I was getting ready to kind of write up something on it. And I went to take a shower, and kind of like I'm engrossed in water, and water is this big conduit. And I close my eyes, and immediately I kind of feel like this trance state come on, and you kind of just, your consciousness falls back a little bit. And I see this being in front of me start walking towards me, and it was massive. I mean, 7-8 foot tall. It looked like, have you ever seen the movie Jupiter Ascending?
I think so.
The one where they have they look like gargoyles. They're like dragons.
Okay.
They're This thing looked like a big gargoyle, just like 8 foot tall gargoyle. He looked like Koopa, King Koopa from Mario Brothers. And I'm like, stop immediately, because I've learned how to defend myself since then. And it said, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. And I said, whoa, hold on a second here. And he starts telling me, my name is Yael, Y-A-E-L. And I wanted to give you some information pertaining to Solomon's Temple. And he goes on and gives me this massive amount of information, which really validates a lot of my theories. What was that?
I mean, in a nutshell, what did he say about the Solomon's Temple that you can remember?
Solomon's Temple was destroyed. But what was really destroyed was man's connectedness to it. Solomon's Temple, the Tower of Babel are all the same idea and conceptualization with just various different cultural attributes. Jachin and Boaz in Solomon's Temple trick you with illusion. The cerebrums that trick you with illusion so you cannot find the entrance. If you get into the door, there's the 12 houses of bread, and then you can get into the Holy of Holies, which is the Ark of the Covenant. What this is actually a representation of is Jachin and Boaz are your eyes. And what they do is they fool you with trickery and illusion to believe that your reality is actually out here. This is Lucifer, the false light, Maya in Buddhism. It's the deceptive light, the light that derives from matter. And that's what Jachin and Boaz try to do, is to deceive you so you do not look within. And so when you go within, this is the entrance into your third eye. This is the same thing as the Tower of Babel. But what you got is the 12 houses of bread, which represent the 12 different archetypes of mind. And you go through the various types of archetypes of mind, and you have to, in a sense, optimize or master these various archetypes of mind. And when you come to this 13th emergent state of mind, you're able to enter into the Holy of Holies, which is basically a inner, deeper connectedness to God, which derives from a level of self-knowing, where Solomon's Temple is really just right here. And all you have to do is reopen it. But the knowledge was lost. And this is what it means that the temple was destroyed, or the Tower of Babel was destroyed. Many people think Babel is actually derived etymologically from the word of speak, but it's not. It actually, Bab means gate, and El means God. So it's the gate of God. And so this was the tower of the gate of God. This is your spine. The tower to the gate of God is the transition of the serpent force, the kundalini in your body, transiting up into the third eye, into the level of awakening. This is the hidden knowledge that was occulted, that was taken out of human history and removed. This is why they say they destroyed the temple. The temple of worship was within the mind, the third eye.
And the Tower of Babel, when we all spoke a universal language too. Maybe that universal language was telepathy, and having the ability to communicate with the ultra-terrestrials and all the rest. But even amongst ourselves, a much more, this is what they said in the Real Society, telepathic communication is the most exact way of transferring information, because you transfer concepts and you transfer whole, even big projects can be visually seen and really understood through this telepathic communication. So if humans once had that ability, perhaps say Atlantis or Lemurian, these lost continents, which by the way, in my book, Modern Esoteric, show pictures of ruins under the ocean, including a pyramid site off of Cuba, including one of the latest that's been found off of the island of Yogaguni in the southern Okinawa islands of Japan. Massive underwater ruins that could have only been created when the sea levels were a lot lower, such as during the last ice age or before. So there's just so much information here, Josh, that high civilizations have existed on this planet. And in some ways, we also have a memory of that. And we're kind of hearkening back to even our old bad habits, such as threatening nuclear war again.
Yep.
And we've been through this song and dance before. It's not something we want to go down again.
Yeah, I agree. And you know, the thing about the fear aspect of it is humanity has been under a dark spell for a very long time. The whole basis of the internet is built upon basically a marketing system that was created for data collection by three-letter agencies. Many people don't know that Facebook, Twitter, Google, Amazon were all funded by In-Q-Tel and other three-letter agency incubators, basically venture capitalists that were directly connected to the intelligence agencies for data capturing and basically learning everything that they could learn about you. There's actually a DARPA project known as LifeLog that started in 1998 that was meant for the collection of data on every single American, and it ended on the same day that Facebook started. Now, wow,
coincidence.
Go figure, right? Yeah, and so, but what this has done is it's perpetuated, basically utilizing their occult knowledge of how our minds actually operate, how our I call it a six-body system, but I call it a four-body system because it extends into the spiritual world, but how our four-body system is much like a kind of an antenna and a modem and a Wi-Fi receiver, right? This is kind of how we operate. Understanding that they can oversaturate our emotional body without us even knowing it, to the point where all they have to do is have that algorithm slowly do it through a month, a week, a few days, and then they can trigger you into a certain action or a mood which makes you click on this or do this or perform this action or even put you into deep depressive states, or maybe even vote for Hillary Clinton or vote for whoever it might be that is a perpetuator of lies and evil.
Right. And what's worse is with DNA collection that they can find everybody's individual resonant frequency. And the whole notion of being a targeted individual goes to the next level with that. Because with their DNA, it's as unique as your fingerprint or your iris. Each one of us is very unique in that regard. So to be able to read our DNA, then if fallen into the wrong hands and used against us, can target an individual. For example, they'd be able to fire one of these microwave energy into a building and only affect the people who they're targeting. Your next door neighbor or someone in your own apartment would be unaffected, but if they wanted to get you, they can do it. That's why I'm so dubious with the up the swab nose tests and anything else where DNA can be just given away to them, because once with that knowledge, you're very disadvantaged if that were to be used against you, and you wouldn't even know where it's coming from.
That's right. And it's interesting because there was just a court case in the UK pertaining to exactly that one of the top swab companies producing the COVID-19 tests was actually collecting the DNA of the individuals and reselling it on the open market. Now, another company, MoLogic, which was just purchased by a collaboration of Bill Gates and George Soros, is the number one creator of these exact tests that are actually getting all the contracts for all the events, the buildings that you have to enter when the social credit score comes out. Before you get in there, you have to take that test and swipe your DNA, and they're going to be collecting it. And this goes to something even more interesting. There's a researcher out there by the name of Dr. Martin Blank. He's an actual scientist, peer-reviewed scientist. 2014, 2015, he wrote a series of articles, a series of scientific studies. The first one was called DNA as an electromagnetic transducer, and the second one is DNA as an electromagnetic, as a fractal antenna. Now, the electromagnetic transducer means that DNA sends and receives signals. He determined that your DNA sends and receives signals, and if you chop up DNA, it still continues to send and receive the signals, even though that it's much, much smaller, but it does it in a fractal format, so it degrades the signal over time, the smaller and smaller that DNA gets. And he determined that the frequency topping point of the receptiveness and the transmission of the DNA was approximately 34 gigahertz. Now, it's a very interesting frequency for Earth because we have something known as a cosmic microwave background radiation, which is between 3 to 300 gigahertz, but tops out primarily on Earth through the different levels of impedance it has to go through in the atmosphere at approximately 32 to 34 gigahertz. As well, it's the first channel of 5G.
Woo! There we go.
Yep.
I'd be very, very dubious of any 5G tower around you. And there are some websites where you can find that out, how close they are, because they have to operate on a very narrow band. So they need to be much closer to each other. Not that we need to have all this high-speed technology unless this whole Internet of Things is just going to become so invasive in our lives in so many different ways. And why do we need that? To download a movie faster? No thanks. 4G, I guess, is fast enough for that. But it's going on now, Josh. And I mean, we could talk about transhumanism and the nanobots and the terraforming of the planet and our bodies, really unbeknown to most people, that we're being changed physically, becoming humans 2.0. And that should be enough to alarm most people.
You know, it's interesting. You said terraforming, and this is a word I've seen coming up over and over the last about 2 weeks. A few months ago on the show, as I said, there's a movie out there with Charlie Sheen in the late 1990s called The Arrival. This is where he's the NASA scientist. He intercepts a signal, and he goes to NASA and says, "Oh my God, it's a signal from space. It's intelligent." They say, "No, it's just bouncing off the moon." He goes to investigate it. He's working at Arecibo. He goes to investigate it down in South America, and he uncovers this manufacturing plant in South America to where all these people are going in, and at night they're releasing massive amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and they're creating global warming. And he goes in there and finds out that they're actually aliens who are utilizing a silicon overskin to look like humans, and they've infiltrated all of society and are basically planning to wipe out humanity with a great plague and terraform the earth for their own use. And I'm like, that was 1998, but like, that's today. Like, that's exactly what's happening right now.
Yep.
And so, and so terraforming makes a lot of sense, because if we look what's really happening on this planet, it's the reduction of the population. You have to ask yourself, really, why? Why would they want to reduce the population by 85%?
It's written right there on the Georgia Guidestones.
Yep. Keep
humanity in perpetual balance at 500 million. Well, what does that do to the other 90% of us?
That's right. So, there's no need for us. And so I think that in that sense, they would have just enough on here to sustain the planet, but also create their terraforming operation to warming the planet and utilizing it as they will. Now, what's your thoughts on transhumanism? What are your Do you think that this is a massive part of this agenda?
Oh, big time. Oh, you bet. In fact, that's what it's all about. They need to get humans to, with all these injectables, and we're not just talking about the latest round of fear tactics to get people to take the jab, but nanobots. They want to get us all affected with nanobots, and by extension, the black goo, this AI sentient formula, to be able to control humans. If we have little antennas in us and they can turn on the pleasure or pain functions, or even interacting with our minds, including voice to skull technology. But and terra, of course, means earth. Terraforming means when you reform a land. But I also look at the human body as a landscape that is being redeveloped into this whole transhumanist 2.0 human. They're trying to make it sound like we're going to become all so much better, and that our neural capacities, put a chip in your brain so you can interface with your phone better. It's just like 5G. I don't need that. Okay, I can use what I have already, and it's plenty. Our little handheld smartphones is more computing power than they had to put a man on the moon in the 1960s. So you got it all right there already. And of course, they're trying to sugarcoat it as this is going to be so great. And, how about if you had an RFID chip and that's all you need to unlock your car or take out money in the ATM? It's like, no, I think I can just take a minute and do that. It's not such a big deal. So the things they're trying to say are going to be so great if we go down this this rosy path. Nah, think twice. But I'm very dubious of this transhumanist agenda. I think it's what it's all about. They want to find out who can live through what is being put into people's bodies now, and they will be the most controllable. Look at a lot of these conferences I speak at. I have the great honor to be asked to be a moderator, and I do panels with the super soldiers, some of who have been 20 and back, and others in the secret space program, and memories of being off planet. So we really do have this breakaway civilization going on right now. And the one thing they're saying is they want these super soldiers to really be so much stronger and higher abilities and be able to withstand temperatures or pressures, such as when you go into outer space. So they very much have a demand to change humans in a way that they would be beneficial to this interplanetary conglomerate, is what it's coming to. We are, if that timeline 2 takes place, we will become like the Avatar movie, just exploiting all these emerging planets. And that is transhumanism as it is starting right now in this present time.
Now, do you think that there's a galactic federation? Do you, that there's good guys out there, and that at some point they potentially could intervene?
Potentially. But again, it's that prime directive that prevents from interfering with emerging civilizations. And if you think about it, it's fair. It's a good approach, because why don't we leave humans up to our own devices to see if we're going to get ourselves together and clean up this planet and stop poverty? But we have been so manipulated and taught to think it's us versus them and fight amongst ourselves and take each other out. Yeah, if we can create World War III and humans killing humans, well, that's great for those that want to see us depopulate. But the Great Awakening is us realizing we're the human family. We're all in this together. So when a poor person goes to bed hungry in a very impoverished nation, I feel that. I feel the pain of this planet screaming out and saying, there are my fellow human beings. Because look, we all bleed red blood. We're all of the same genetic family. And even though we have a breakaway civilization in outer space right now, Josh, we also still have humans that live in the Stone Age, in the depths of the Amazon or in Papua New Guinea, who are going to get their dinner tonight with a blow dart. And they'll just skin that animal up and eat it. I mean, people do live that way still on this planet. So there's such a dichotomy of who the human race is right now. It's so fascinating that we may have this moment, this light bulb goes off moment, the 100th monkey effect, where humans just get it. And we just can see through all the lies and deception which have been festooned upon us. And I would love to be alive and play my role in seeing that moment happen. In fact, I think that's why a lot of us have volunteered for this mission down here on Prison Planet, knowing that it's not going to be too easy. But if we can pull this off, then this planet can be saved.
Spot on. I mean, absolutely 100% correct. And we feel it. We feel it like as if humanity is moving towards this precipice moment, this grand time in history where humanity is just going to wake up and there's going to be a powerful force that overcomes us all, to where we all see this clear vision, not in a sense of a hive mind, but more in a consensus or collective consciousness, to where it's just it's going to be over for them. It's going to be like the movie They Live. We're all going to put on the glasses and we're all going to see through the lies and the bullshit. And at that moment, they realize that it's over and that it's just the whole world changes from there, because we retain the power. We get our power back, and we are powerful beings. I think that if we look back at history, if we go to like some very ancient books like Mahabharata, right? We start talking about human beings on this planet who were highly advanced. And it feels almost as if like they were invaded by some type of alien force and they lost this war and then were enslaved for countless millennia. And I think that's really more of the truth of the story. But that we're coming to a point in our galactic processional cycle to where there's going to be more connectedness, there's going to be more openness, and that our minds really are moving through a progressive evolution. Just like planets go, stars live and die, they go through an evolution, that the universe has a process and a flow for everybody and everything, in that we're moving into this next point of evolution, and this is their big concern. And one of the reasons they're moving us into this digital slave matrix, that they're trying to do this transhumanistic agenda, they're trying to decrease the population numbers because they want us at a very, very small population, so when we do wake up, we're controllable. And that they can go out and eliminate us because we're easily, they can find us pretty easy. But if there's 8 billion of us, oh man, they don't have a chance in hell.
Well, there you have it in a nutshell. That's why they'd like to keep it just enough worker bee humans who have been doused with nanobots and other things that are put in the body to make us controllable and follow their agenda and deliver their packages from Amazon. That they need a couple useless eaters around to do their bidding. Although the useless ones, they get off. They're just the worker bees, the hive mind. They would love that. Oh boy, would they love to make humans a hive mind with the queen bee, the globalist at the control. Who are these people? And as we said in the setup piece, Josh, we're not even sure they are entirely human. I mean, this agenda could be coming down from upon high by anti-humans who are not even humans.
Yep.
And then you have the cone-headed types. Bones have been found. I'm very interested in the study of giants and these elongated heads. That's down in South America, Josh. You could go into museums and see these things, and they're massive. They got like 30% larger craniums than humans do. They don't have a central suture. Their eye sockets are 30% bigger, and the gap where the spine reaches the skull is also much different than human. So they're very human-like, but they're not human. And my friend and colleague Brian Forrester, he collects all this great information, and we share information. He sent me some pictures of people with the giant head that are still alive today. They're still around. You know, and we have this weird stuff like Rh negative blood types, whereas Rh negative O blood type is the universal donor. That happens to be my dad.
That's me.
But he can give blood to every single human. Yeah, you too. You're an Rh negative. That makes a lot of sense. We can give blood to anybody, but gets anything other than Rh negative O, it'll kill him. And so isn't that interesting? And it happened in my family. My grandmother, Rh negative, gave birth to an Rh positive baby because her husband was Rh positive. That baby was tainted with the mother's blood and died at 5 days.
Wow.
No other animal does that on Earth except human. And that is proof enough that we are a hybridization of many different types right here in this day and age. A good example is how a mule and a horse can mate, or I mean a donkey and a horse will have a mule. It's a hybrid. It can't reproduce anymore, but that mule is like a new species.
Yep.
And so we're like that too. And that's the incompatible blood that can kill a mother's own offspring.
And you know, what's interesting, one of my friends, Dr. Brian Artis, he just came out with this documentary.
Oh, you know him. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
He's revolutionary.
I just talked to him tonight on another show that I
great.
hosted on American Media Periscope. But
That's awesome.
yeah, but we were talking about it, and Genentech, which is one of the most wealthiest companies in the Silicon Valley, their founder was one of the first people to ever create a chimera type of species, basically genetically splicing two species together, as well as creating, they own the patents on the synthetic organisms that were created back in 2014 and 2015. And this is their purpose, is basically to genetically alter human beings once again. And I want people to understand that, once again, because we have been genetically altered before. This actually takes me into the Tartarian aspect of this, and this is what we talked about. When you start looking at human history about the beginning of the 20th century, things get weird, because if we look at the numbers of the population, and I want everybody out there to look this up and check my number because I know I'm right on this, is we had a population about 1 billion at the turn of the 20th century in 1900. Then we have World War I, we have the Spanish flu, we have World War II, we have communism and fascism, which rise up and slaughter hundreds of millions. So we have about 500 million people before 1950 that part this earth, right? So we have 1 billion people at the beginning of 1900. We have about 500 million people that are killed within the first 50 years. Now, people have done the math on this. This would mean that in order to have a population of 8 billion people today, that each person beginning in 1900 would have to have 8 kids, those kids would have to have 8 kids, and those kids would have to have 8 kids, which is statistically improbable.
That's a huge population burst, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm following you on this. That's
Yep.
so interesting.
And people have talked about Tartaria, which would have spread throughout all of Europe and Eastern Europe. And where did World War I and World War II focus on, and what buildings did they primarily destroy? Right? It was, and some people claim that really this invasion of humanity didn't happen thousands of years ago, but instead happened maybe just a few hundred years ago. And what happened was, and this is one of my theories, is that whatever it was parasitic. And that the Rh negative factor in our blood, because all humans, I believe, at this time were Rh negative, allowed whatever this was to basically take over us as a parasite and infiltrate our society. And so what we did is we genetically altered ourselves with an Rh factor, with the rhesus monkey gene. And this stopped this parasite from spreading. But what happened is it destroyed our population because we weren't able to mate together. We lost our genetic lineage, our genetic memory, our connectionness to the third eye, God, the self. A lot of people, were coming back and not remembering things. And if you look at like the World's Fair, how they had the infantoriums, they had babies on display. If you go look at the literature in the late 19th and early 20th century, there's tons of orphanages. Where the heck are all the parents for all these kids? Why are all these orphanages all around the world? It makes no sense. And then you go to the French catacombs, which was supposedly from the Black Plague. And, 10 Jesuit priests that burned these bodies and then took them to the catacombs. The catacombs are 3 square miles. That have been excavated, 30 square miles continuous. And they're filled with bones of human beings that were basically died in the Black Plague, and they've kind of organized them in nice art forms. The femur's over here, the skull's over here, and it forms this nice art that goes around all the catacombs. Well, only 3 square miles have been excavated, and in that 3 square miles, they estimate 6 million people. So if you multiply that times 10, which would be 30 square miles, you get 60 million people. The problem with that is the population during the Black Plague in France was 340,000. The population of Europe was 2.3 million. How do you get 60 million people there? How do you even get 6 million into 3 square miles if the population of all of Europe is only 2.3 million? And so there's a lot of these things that just don't make sense throughout history.
And also keep in mind that the farther you go back with archaeological ruins, that there was some kind of event, a mud flood that buried all of them. And why do you think the Easter Islands are only a third of the way out, just the neck up, but they have full bodies with arms around their bellies, no legs, but the long torso. Places like Egypt, they all had to be dug out. And other places in Asia I visited that have just been washed over, some kind of cataclysm, a mud flood. The island of Malta, all those great megalithic ruins were just a little bit sticking out of the top. They had to dig down and get them all unburied.
Yep.
So much history has not been told, Josh. So I really appreciate your perspective here, because we're right on the same page with this.
Well, and that's why I say it's a conversation. And this is why I love bringing people on, because it's a collaboration of ideas, and you begin to see how those ideas begin to come together, and like your research and my research just begin to merge. And we never met each other. We have completely different origins of how this information came to us, but it's all 100% completely on point with each other. It's remarkable, because that's the human condition, right? Is that we're so interconnected, and we never realize it until we begin to actually communicate with each other, and we realize how special we really are.
Good point. Well said.
Well, Brad, this was one of the fastest hour and a halves I've ever had in my life. This was an absolute blast. I don't even think we've begun. I think there's like hours of stuff that we still have to cover. So I'm going to ask you back again. I can't wait to have that conversation, because it's going to be well worth it for the viewers. Everybody's having a great time out there. Everybody absolutely loved this show. I'm reading all the comments. I appreciate you for your time, my friend. This was a great conversation. Absolutely amazing.
Oh, that's great, Josh. Thanks for having me on, and be delighted to come back on with you. You're really so spot on. We're really kin folks now.
Yeah.
Same wavelength on so many different things, so it's great.
All right, give me 1 second, Brad. You guys can find Brad Olsen at bradolsen.com. It is linked up in all the description boxes below, and his other links are also linked up there. And I believe you can get your books on your website at bradolsen.com. Is that correct?
Or cccpublishing.com. There'd be a link there, but yeah, my new book is Beyond Esoteric, Escaping Prison Planet, and any books ordered off of CCC Publishing go through my office, and I'm able to sign copies for people on the way out.
Fantastic. We're going to pick up a few copies of that book. Guys, we're headed to Fringe After Dark here in about, give me 40 minutes. 40 minutes, Fringe After Dark. That is our private broadcast, a conversation after the conversation on Zoom and stream privately on YouTube. If you're interested in taking part in that, go to socialredpill.com, and you can sign up for just a cup of coffee a month, $5.99, and you can jump into that conversation. That's socialredpill.com. Our mods will get those links out for you guys. That'll be at 40 after the hour. We'll be jumping in there, and I'm going to leave you guys with a promo video for the Mars Chronicles, which starts tomorrow, Saturday night, with myself and David Whitehead. It'll be broadcast on all Red Pill Project channels, as well as all DW Truth Warrior channels. I hope you guys all have a great and fantastic night. Thank you again to my good friend Brad Olsen here for this great conversation tonight. You guys have a great night, and here is the promo for the Mars Chronicles.
From the earliest history of mankind, there's been a bright red speck of light in the night sky called Mars. For the last few hundred years, we've known that it's a planet, a place more or less like our own, a world in its own right.
The embarrassment here for science is that you are seeking to unearth a natural fact by way of the humanistic evidence, which is to say you're bringing together a synthesis of different kinds of knowledge.
We should go boldly where man has not gone before. Fly by the comets, visit asteroids, visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours. When people find out about that, they're going to say, who put that there?
One of the things you'll notice is that there appears to be an 18-mile crater called Oort. If you were standing in Oort at the right moment and looking directly overhead, there would be the Earth. At the closest point on the moon to Earth, there is a crater with an equilateral triangle marking its interior. The symbol we have decoded from the monuments of Mars. It was this symbol which basically focused our attention on this region. Because in the idiom that someone has been in the solar system long before, that someone has left a series of monuments or structures or artifacts designed to tell us something.
A time has come where we are reaching the end of a cycle. And the intelligent, civilized, advanced, thoughtful, caring, knowledgeable, compassionate human being is facing a future. A door is being opened for them to an infinite reality out there. And we have got to be prepared to go through that door. And we're not ready yet.
National sovereignty. Unless, of course, the idea is they're trying to con everybody and then take it all back in another dark way. But I just wonder, is that people's paranoia? I mean, what do you think?
Well, did you remember Elon's comment when he talked about the population? He said, I think it's too little, because if we're going to go to Mars, we're going to need a lot more people.
Yeah, so most people in the world are operating under the false impression that there are too many people. This is not true. Earth could maintain a population many times the current level. And the birth rate has been dropping like crazy. Unfortunately, like we have these like ridiculous population estimates from the UN that need to be updated because they just don't make any sense.
If we're gonna go to Mars, we're gonna need a lot more people. Elon wants to get off planet for some reason. I think he knows what's on Mars. I think he understands the opportunity that lays on Mars. I think we all understand that we probably came from Mars.
Dude, you just opened... We're what, 2 hours and 40 minutes in, and you want to open up the Mars basket? Okay, Josh, let's plan this right now, okay? Because I want to do this. Let's do a show on this on Mars. I would love to do it on the Mars, on the moon shit, like what's on the moon. Let's do that show as a separate show because there's already too much here. But that opens up another can of worms.
It does.